Brown, how can a candidate stand out beyond their experience in an application process when they have no personal or professional connections within the district or with the administrators or AD responsible for hiring? I'm just going to answer this one very simply. If you're that person, find somebody that knows the person that's hiring, because I promise you, all of us ADs, we network together. We go to the same conferences. Especially if it's in the same region. But Coach Stewart and Coach Pearson, we used to be in the same region. We're no longer in the same region, but we're still connected. So if it's important to you, you'll do the research, figure out, and I'm going to go back to Pat Cohan, broken record. I'm telling you, go watch that that recording, so that you get that knowledge piece to go figure out, how can you figure out where I was at, and do you actually have connections you just don't know about? Because you may have connections to me, specifically to my job right now, that you just don't know about. And I will tell you, Coach Brown, you do, because I don't know you from Adam, but I know somebody that knows you. So network cannot be preached enough. It's so important. And if we don't, I promise you, I know somebody else that you know that I already don't know about.
And that's going to coaching school, coaching clinics. And when you go there, you're working the room. If you sit at a table with the same people that you go there with, you're never going to expand that network. So you go to local coaching clinics, you go to the statewide coaching clinics, and then you also begin to reach out outside your district. Go and talk to other ADs or other head coaches so that you can begin to expand your network. You don't have to stay in that bubble that you're currently in based off of where you are actually employed. You can extend yourself a little bit and start building that network, because if you don't ever make those connections, you're going to always end up short.
Yep. Yeah, I would tell you, it's difficult for you all, especially if you're not a head coach right now. It's extremely difficult for y'all to get out. So it's hard to go to AD regional meetings. But the AD's state conference has an aspiring athletic directors / head coach group. And it's right after, for most schools, it's right after school is out. And it's typically when people are taking a week off of strength and conditioning before they start, like take a breather. It's always the end of May, beginning of June now. So it's a great resource to go and make connections. The other thing I would tell you, and I'm going to speak this out loud because sometimes I'm just brutally honest, and I'm okay with it. And it's just it's a thing. I'm going to tell you that part of your question is coming from a piece where you don't know me, but you're here, and I know that you're here, and we are now making a connection. I'm just going to tell you, I got 85 applicants, and I've lost count, to be perfectly honest with you. I think we probably gained about 30-ish. Not all of those were actual applicants, but if you applied for this job, I've been posting like a madman. It's been, I don't know if it's re-xed or retweeted or it's been shared out a bunch. If you're not here, you don't really want my job. If you know anything or don't know anything, like if somebody that you're looking to get a job for is putting on something like this, or attending something like this, it sends up a signal to me. How committed are they to personal growth, and will they lead in that manner? I'm just going to tell you, I've highlighted everybody that's here who's applied. I can't hire all of them because I have one job, but I can tell you, and I'm not going to say that it's you, Coach. I can tell you that I moved somebody out of my yellow folder into my green folder. They may go right back. Don't think that that's going to automatically get them to the table, because I have too many to even bring to the interview table. But if it means enough to me, this type of stuff, and it doesn't have to be mine, but if you can show that you're growth minded, that's important to me. It's going to get me to look at you more. And so I'm going to take a deeper dive. So I moved that resume packet from the yellow to the green, so that I'm gonna put my eyes on that person once again. It's important. Um, it's very important. So yeah, connections are huge, but what you're doing right now is gonna bridge some of that gap. So appreciate you, Coach. All right, and then there were two. We're we're the heavy, Eric.
I got
Uh,
you.
but that's okay, guys. I told y'all we're going to answer the questions, and if we go, we may have to figure out if it keeps growing on us, we may have to figure out a part two. But I fully don't. They stayed on way longer than I expected, so um, appreciate them for doing that. Coach Grimes, how do you go about researching a candidate and references when they have a longer history in college football as opposed to high school football? Um, Eric, you got something on this because I could.
I mean, today with the internet, you can find out anything. I was talking to a Metroplex AD this today, and they were talking about their football candidates, and that a guy who coached at Kansas and Kansas State and so forth, and he didn't know much about him, and we just put his name in, and everything comes up. The times he's there and so forth. But I mean, right now, internet and social media wise, you can find out almost anything, good and bad, on people.
Yeah, 100%. And I am a literal broken record. Pat Cohan, Pat Cohan, Pat Cohan. Go watch that 20 minutes of him on Chat GPT because it's gonna save me a ton of time. And those of you that are listening that already saw it know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, it's difficult, and I will tell you, Coach Grimes, the position that you're in is, and I think I've seen your information, and so if I remember correctly, you're in Texas now. But the if because there might be they might be in here. I can guarantee you, anytime there's a head football job, and Coach can tell you across the state, doesn't matter where you're at, a lot of the applicants that we get, especially fast, are from out of state and have never been in Texas or in the collegiate world. That's not an immediate red flag and terrible thing because there's a perceived high level of football knowledge especially if you're consistently at the college level. One would think, just on paper initially without diving in, that there's some high level knowledge there. But the hurdle that you have is what I talked about earlier, the compliance piece to this position. How much am I willing to do to get somebody up to speed, because I've got other things to do, and I rely on, I've got 4 coordinators in this district, 2 at each campus. I rely on them a lot. Once trust is built, we're a team of 5, and I like to think that we're a well-oiled machine, and they take a lot off my plate. But it's because I trust, and we build that trust, that the compliance piece they're handling for me and are asking questions when unique things come up. That's a piece where people without that experience, you have to overcome that. And so it's not something you can't that's insurmountable. But I would say, blanket statement to those people, my hope is, and I don't always see this, my hope is that those people are also putting in for coordinator jobs in Texas. Get your feet into the systems, so that you're getting that experience in UIL compliance. You're getting that Texas, high school football teacher coach. But also the other important thing is to already have a Texas teaching certificate. Those are the things that are kind of roadblocks for our out of state / college people that apply. So hopefully that answered your question. I think Eric and I gave kind of 2 sides to that, but I think both of them are things that we look at. Okay, moving on, Coach Davis. Coach Davis, how do you evaluate an internal candidate versus an external candidate? What separates an internal candidate from the previous head coach and/or coordinator if the district initiated change at the position? Go ahead, Eric.
I can tell you right now, if you're an internal candidate, you have an advantage because we see you every single day. we have spent probably a couple of years with you, seeing your work and what you do with the program. So that's a great thing to always remember. Hey, I need to be doing this. And we've talked about all these different things, whether it's cleaning plates or laundry or whatever else, that you're a doer. That's a great thing for your principal and your athletic director to see. The problem happens is when you don't do what you're supposed to do and you're an internal candidate, that is remembered as well. So that's something you got to think about. And then with your external candidate, you're relying on your interview, you're relying on your reference phone calls to their head coach or an OC or DC or principal or whatever else. So I mean, it's a double-sided sword. If you take the right side, it can really work for you.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this as honestly as I can and not lean too heavily off the fence. Here's what I'll say, because I'm going to answer this. How do I evaluate internal, and what separates internal candidates from previous? And I will tell you that internal candidates or candidates that, and I won't even say internal, I'll say candidates that I had personal experience with, even if it's outside of here, because I have all of the above in my current folders right now. Your body of work is going to put you in one of two categories: the green folder or the red folder. There will not be an in-between folder for people that I know, because immediately when I see your name, I don't even have to read this stuff. Your body of work, so your work ethic. We talked about plate cleaner. What types and levels of work are you doing? Are you already contributing to other sports? And you always have to remember, not just the other sports, but the other genders. But you can't even just isolate yourself to I'm an aspiring football coach. I got to make sure I'm noticed on the girls' side. No, you need to be noticed in baseball because you may share athletes, but you need to be noticed in track. You need to be noticed in soccer, boys and girls. So don't pigeonhole yourself and say, well, I got to make sure I focus on the girls too. Everybody, all of that's seen ahead of time. And people that know me on here know this as well. I offer a lot of things, and I expect my leaders to be growth-minded people. And I said this earlier, if you're not already contributing in that way, whether it's being supportive of the other programs, or if it's already someone who dives in, like, it's immediate red folder for me. I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but clearly what is important to me is not important to that person if they're not already involved and they're internal, or I know what they did or didn't do in prior experience with me, because I haven't changed. And so the same types of opportunities would have been available then. So those are immediate separators from any sort of candidates that I have personal experience with or professional experience with. And again, it's straight away. I don't even have to look at anything. I can just see the name and it'll be green or red. That's just being as honest and transparent as I can be. The meat of your question is, clearly I know where that's coming from. And it's difficult because it's also situational. And sometimes it's an easy fix or solution, and sometimes it's a very difficult fix or solution. So, it's like we said earlier, and I think I used the example with Ricky at Gatesville. Somebody that's a high level quality or the right fit quality person for Gatesville may not be that right fit for me, and vice versa. So it's also situational in that same regard within that same school or school district when you're internal. Depending on what the situation is, there's so many things, and I think I beat around the bush a little bit, and I've had some pretty open conversations, and just keep being a doer, be a plate cleaner, get after it with positive attitude, because at the end of the day, whether that person is elevated from an internal candidate to a head football coach, or you're having conversations, working to keep that person. The thing that we all want, and when I say we all athletic directors across the state, everybody that was on tonight, and all of our colleagues, we want quality people in all positions. Now that's difficult, but I don't think it's an unrealistic expectation. I want my junior high coaches to be quality people that get after it and to help develop our kids so that we vertically align and grow up the chain all the way up to varsity. So same with the high school assistants. So I want people to keep doing that. So I definitely don't want to lose good quality people because the head position wasn't attained. Coach Marlborough, hope I'm pronouncing that right. In the interview process, what is the number one mistake that coaches make? What is the best thing a coach did during the interview process that you remember? I can tell you, I can remember, and I don't know if he's still here. I'm sure he was here at some point. I had a conversation with somebody that I've interviewed in the past immediately after, and it wasn't just an intentional, but it was it was a, hey man, I noticed this, and this is something you're going to want to fix when you go forward. Didn't matter to me because I had a connection, but it may have mattered to the other people in the room. When you walk in, male, female, doesn't matter, make a point to put your stuff down, or if it's simpler, greet every person with a handshake and introduce yourself and thank them for their time and for listening to you today. When everybody does that, because that's the norm for the most part. In my experience, that's the norm. When everybody does it, it doesn't stand out. When somebody doesn't do it, it stands out. And that was the conversation, because you can interview lights out, but that first contact, which is, and a lot of times it's the first time anybody's ever personally seen you or spoken to you, potentially, that could be the thing that bumps somebody in front of you. And that was a conversation that I had with someone, several years back when we kind of followed up after the fact, because they were a rock star handling questions, but it's just that other little piece. Don't ever forget that. Take advantage of that first opportunity to make a first impression.
And I think another thing is, and a lot of people don't get to interview a bunch of times, but you can tell when someone comes into an interview and they haven't interviewed in a while because their answers aren't smooth, the tone's not smooth, and everything else. Go back and practice an interview. I'll tell you this, 10 years ago when I interviewed for the AD job here in Keller, I sat in our bedroom in front of our mirror, asking myself questions, making sure that my eye contact and I was smooth and I knew what I was saying over and over. And you would eventually, what happens sometimes is if you're not used to it, you start rambling and you start moving on in different directions and so forth, and you got to pull yourself back in. But put yourself, and here's the thing, I tell everyone, we have 350 coaches in Keller ISD. If you want to interview for a job and you want help, come to me. I will do a fake interview with you every single day as long as it's done. And I've done it several times. I'll ask you questions and I'll give you straight feedback. And that is something that's very important, because if you're not interviewing well, you're going to have some issues trying to get to that second portion. And the last thing, the best thing, I will tell you this about interview process that I remember: if you have a personality, if you can smile, if you can make eye contact, if you can read the room, read if you're starting to lose someone, of how to try to get them back into the conversation. And again, that takes repetitive time of doing it over and over again, and learning from someone who sits in interviews all the time and sees what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, 100%. And that was me. 100%, Eric. That's me. And I remember this more in interviewing for AD positions. I interviewed 4 times, twice brought back for finals, and got no's. But every one of those times, I grew in my comfort level in an interview and in a room to now. It makes no difference to me what the room looks like. I'm not uncomfortable if I walk in and there's 15 people there. Early in that progression in my career, I mean, I felt competent. Of course, I had plenty of room to grow, but the comfort piece in front of that committee and coming into an unknown, not knowing what you're going to walk into, there was a big difference there. And so I always remind myself those no's were yeses for me years later, because had I not had the experience of those no's and the experience in those interviews with the process, and just the growth in me personally, because I'm very flat faced. I'm very quiet until I get to know people, and then I can come out of my shell in certain areas. But outside of that, I'm kind of a flat faced person. So if you know me, you know I'm kind of expressionless, or I may have a frown. It's not really a frown. It's just me. But it's understanding that and being able to walk into that room and flip a switch so that I kind of change my face a little bit, because if I'm coming off as unhappy, I need to know those things so that now I'm communicating. Plus, just that comfort level in that room. And I will say this, and I think to an extension of Eric, when you walk out of an interview, I think it's a great idea to have a little pad, something like this. You'll see. I'm gonna give it one more time for the Pat Cohan video hour chat GPT. That was so I remember to tell y'all. Have something like this in your vehicle, and as soon as you get back to your vehicle after the interview, write down as many questions as you can remember that they asked you. And not because you may walk back in there, but if you get called back for a final, they may not be the exact same question, but you may be able to speak to a question that they asked in round one differently in round two, because now you've got some thought process behind it. Or maybe you don't come back for a round two and you get a no, or you get a yes, and somewhere down the line you're going to interview again. Understanding what people ask, because we're all going to ask similar questions, but sometimes different. Getting good at answering questions and having answers that have some depth to them, but you're not talking for 30 minutes either. You need to have kind of clear and concise answers. I would say if you're talking more than 5 minutes, it really depends on the question, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you're going more than 5 minutes, you're rambling. Clear and concise, and so write those questions down so you can get comfortable with those. That was a huge piece to me. When I walked into Robinson, I was the assistant AD at Grapevine Colleyville for 5 years and AP for 1 year, my first year there, and had, like I said, four places. When I walked into Robinson, it was a nothing burger for me. It's no offense to them, but I knew what I was doing within the scope of work. I was growing in Grapevine Colleyville. Plus, I had experienced 4 very, very different interview styles, and I got there, and it's just super easy. And you just grow into that comfort, and then here as well. I'm just not intimidated when I walk in, because I'm confident that I've been down that road, and I do the work to get better at what, especially when I know that I have a deficit in a specific question. I'm for sure going to go back and bone up on that question. All right, Coach Williams, when there are multiple internal applicants and 2 are the OCDC, how does this affect the process? It's situational. I'm just going to tell you. Some people will tell you that's a death sentence, because some people will tell you that that's just terrible and you should just go outside because your office is divided, and that could be the case. It could also be the case that you have 2 people that are high quality coaches that are on that path to being a head coach, and both want it, and maybe they've talked to each other and they said, hey, I know you're going after it, I'm going after it because it's our career. If I get it, I'd love for you to be my OC. If you get it, I'd love to still be your DC. Let's work together. So it really depends. Are they butting heads and cooperative, or is it the other? I've had the situation in other schools where this very thing came up, and had it not been for COVID, it would have hurt both of them, to be perfectly honest with you, because they were different people, and it just was it was a weird scenario, but that was that situation. But COVID also dictated that situation because I needed somebody familiar with the kids because we weren't seeing them, as you all remember. So it really just depends, and it's one of those things that we're going to dive into, and we're going to know because they're internal. We're going to know what's going on, and we're going to know what the situation is. I hope it's just that they're both on the same track, and and then we got a tough choice with two internal. I've only had that happen once, where I thought it was worth its weight. All right, Coach Shaw. What key qualifications or criteria do you look for in applicants during the interview process, hire review process, when selecting applicants to bring in for formal interview? I think we've talked about this quite a bit already. This question dated all the way, or went all the way back to 6/17. So I think we've probably answered Coach Shaw's question, but I'm going to reiterate. For me personally, I'm looking for that. The knowledge piece, which is really an expectation. So I spend more time in the other side of things than necessarily I do with knowledge, because I'm going to get a lot of that either by I know the person or I know somebody that knows the person. So I'm going to invest more time in what are you doing outside of the sport that I'm interviewing you for, because I know what's important to me. I know what my campus needs. So are you that person? And sometimes a lot of times that black and white paper doesn't tell us those things, and so we've got to do that. That's I think several of us talked about it. That's when we're so in the weeds right now, because we're running through who you are as candidates before we get to that point, so that we do bring in the right people, so that at the end of the day, if we bring in 6 or 8 people, whatever the number is, we're satisfied with the quality that we're bringing in, and then you get to the table and it's like, who wins the day? Who is the best fit and the best interview of the day? And if I can bring in 6 people that I'm great with because they meet all the other stuff, then may the best man win in this situation, or woman win in another sport. So, all right, Coach Frazier, and we're still standing strong. We got a few people. It looks like we have 4 left, I think. So we're gonna knock this out. Eric, appreciate you hanging with me.
Okay.
Coach Frazier, what does a young leader have to demonstrate beyond their resume to stand out against people who have decades more experience?
Well, I think, to be honest, you're going to have something on that resume that says what you do. You're going to have some skills. You're going to have, varsity assistant, first varsity assistant, OC, DC, whatever else. That's just the truth of it. The odds of someone getting hired, and at least for a large 6A program or a 5A program, or even 4A, you're going to have some skins on the walls to do that. You need to be, and I always say this to all our head coaches, you need to be a kid magnet. You need to be where kids want to be around you, and you're not running them off. It's a whole different world. Most of us grew up in a total different time, and you're going to have to adjust. If you adjust to the way society is right now with our kids and how we do things, I'm not saying you give up anything. You say you don't lower your standards, but you may have to do things in different ways. You work your butt off wholeheartedly. You do everything you can to be successful. You're the one where the head coach looks around and says, man, he's over there working. He's doing something above and beyond, or he showed up at a different practice to help out. But you have to somehow show that you are doing something above and beyond if you don't have those titles yet. And you're going to have patience. We had a position open up 2 years ago at one of our high schools. We had people who were in 8th grade coaches that have coached for 5 years that were trying to be a 6A head coach. And that's just not going to work. You've got to bring something to the table. And you have to have patience, because you're not going to get there just like that. Heck, it took me, this is my 32nd year. It took me 22 years to get where I was right here. And you're going to have to do the same thing, or you're going to get very, very frustrated.
Yeah. That's good. But I'm gonna add, if you're doing all those things already as a young leader, and I'm answering this just kind of without knowing the facts, but I'm just going to tell you that sometimes the fit, someone with 10 to 12 years, which is probably going to put them in their, we'll just say, mid to late 30s, early 40s ish, that's been getting the job done, is a high energy person who has self control and demonstrating all the leadership traits that we're looking for. Like, they may relate, and kids may buy into them better. They may be a better fit for the program, and that's where we as leaders, and of course I'm speaking for our principals and other district leaders as well. When we have to know what our campus needs. We have to know what our kids need. Do they need that veteran who has sound systems? They got a program. That's the program. This is what we're going to do. It's highly structured. It's disciplined. Like that just is what it is. They may need that. They may also need somebody who can come in with a program, but with a different kind of relational capacity. So I don't want to say, because you're a young leader, if you're doing the stuff that's where, again, we kind of go back to, we get into the weeds and reach out to people to learn based on what we need, who you are. We try and do that as much as possible before we bring you in, so that we don't bring in 6 people and we learn then on the day of interview that 4 of them aren't good fits they're great coaches, but they're not good fits for the program that we're trying to hire for. They might be good for our program on the other side of town, or for a neighboring, but they're not really the one we're hiring for. That's not the time to learn that, because now we're down to 2 candidates. And what if they're not good? Now we're back to re-interviewing. So it's, we just, some of what, and I think I've said this before, in my case specifically, there's going to be one person. And so that means there's going to be, right now, 84 no's. Let's use that to grow, and learn from and grow, and keep working toward that. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't be a yes next year in the same same school. It really is situational. And so, and you're not going to know all that stuff, although you should do some homework. And I think Eric said this earlier, like, have an idea, research the campus, know what you're walking into, from bell schedule to kids to, community, all that stuff. Have an idea, and already have a frame of reference. Am I a good fit for this school? Because you might find that you're not. Because when you come in for an interview, you should also be interviewing us. Are you going to be a good fit, or am I a good fit to be your leader? Do you relate to me? Like, are we going to get along? That's important, because we're going to spend a lot of time together. So there's a lot that goes into it. That's a pretty broad question. I think we answered it, but I didn't want to discourage you either. Now, if you don't have a ton of experience, then I would say keep doing what you're doing and work up that ladder so that you can get into that coordinator area. And now you start getting those skins on the wall in a coordinator role, and you get yourself in that room maybe. I'm not sure exactly what the situation is. All right, Ahmad, I think we've answered this one, but I have a pretty specific. I'm just going to reiterate what I answered. On a resume, what's the best way to show leadership or initiative in a brief or concise way without selling yourself short? Again, personal preference, but all of us see kind of the same things. If you want to show leadership and initiative, show me that you're willing to invest in yourself. And I try hard to not like toot this horn, like I'm driving this aim high thing. It's important to me, but I'm only doing this because the Elite Coaches Mastermind went under. I was just a member of that one before. But I loved it so much that somebody had to kind of pick it up. And so that's where we're at right now. So please understand that, I drove people here, one, because I was hoping to we could pour into each other and we could answer some good questions for y'all, and you could grow. But I would say, if it's this community, great. Find yourself a community where you're investing in yourself, because if somebody put on their resume professional experience, and I'm going to give you a brief example. So I have on mine, and it's been a long time since I've looked at my resume. Just full disclosure, but I have a small section. I don't know if you can see that, about an inch or so, inch and a half of some bullet sections, and again, not to toot my own horn in the people, but this is just my experience. Like I like to write. So I enjoy in my quiet time. That's just kind of how I think and process. I write. So a while I just decided, like, if I'm going to write, I'm going to publish it. So I put author. I put on there that I'm a CMAA with the NIAAA, and that's super important, especially in my line of work. Y'all at your spot are probably not going to get to that point yet, but being able to show that you're involved and invested in associations and in your own growth, like what is attainable for you all right now is if you put yourself in the Texas High School Athletic Directors Association, you start the TAC program, year and a half, 2 years, I think, and it's easy. There's no test. You just show up to conferences and go through the sessions, and once you've done that enough, there's a list of things you have to do. But if you're TAC, TAAC, you put that on your resume. That tells me that you're going to and invested in the ADs Association, which tells me that you're driven to be something more than an assistant coach or a head coach. You want to go beyond THSCA and really develop yourself. And I said earlier, I've seen two people, one with RAA and one with CAA, and those are through the National Interscholastic Athletics Administrators Association, NIAAA. Those stand out to me. So, and those don't take up any space, really. They don't. But it shows that you value growth. That may not be important to everybody. I'm just going to be honest with you. Some people would skim right over that. And that's just full disclosure. I know people that would skim right over that. But it doesn't hurt you to have that on your resume, because if they skim over it, not a big deal. They may be looking for something else. But if you send me that same resume, it's noticeable now for me. It didn't hurt you in the other one, but it helped you for me. I hope that answered that, Ahmad, and just help, because to me, you're talking leadership and initiative. You doing extra stuff does that. Participation in associations and just extra than what your campus or district do. Coach O, I prepared for that already because I saw you and I thought, oh, I'm going to butcher this name. Coach O, I hope you're still with us, or that you hear this at some point so that I'm asking your question and I'm referred to you as Coach O. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I bet you that's what you go by. How do you compare applications from head coaches, OCDC, and assistant coaches when deciding who moves on to the next round? And again, this is another one that's somewhat repetitive. Not that it's a bad question, but I think we've talked about it through our processes. This is not the comparing is us diving into who the person is and reaching out to our networks. I'm going to tell you that as deep as my group is right now, if you've not been a head coach or an OCDC, an assistant coach only right now is not coming in. In a different year, 3 years ago, maybe if you had, depending on where your assistant coach experience was, possibly, but the depth was not, my green folder was nowhere near, that, 3 years ago or another year. This year's, to me, I think it's a unique year in that the numbers are up. I think it's a really good thing. Head coaches and OCDC, it's just going to be on experience. I love, how excited, this is for all you coordinators out there. And I'm not saying I'm going with a coordinator, because sometimes it's the same with the head coach, but I love how excited an OC and a DC is when they get that first head coach job. They've done the work to get there. They just haven't been given the yes yet. When you're able to give that yes, man, it's sometimes magic what happens, because they just work. There's so much value, because it's that first piece. They've been working so hard to get it. Now they've got it. Now what am I going to do with my baby? And I'm not saying that other coaches don't do that, but there's something special to be able to watch and grow a brand new head coach and what they bring. And then for me, it's just kind of fun. And again, it goes back to me just being kind of wacky. I just like to grow people as best I can. And I'm going to have such a connection with this position that it allows me that opportunity to dive into, mentor. I'm going to expect for them to go to the AD stuff with me when they're not coaching. I take all my coordinators to the AD conference. I'm taking 10 people this year to the traveling. I don't remember what they're calling it now, but it's the old leadership summit, THSCA, that's now traveling all over the state. Freaking awesome idea, because I couldn't take 10 people to Arlington from Clute before, but it's such a great event. Now they're traveling all over the place. It's right up the road for me. I can take 10 people easy. And so I need people like that. And I outside of what we've already said, I don't know that there's another answer. I do like head coach experience and head coach experience that's successful. But head coach experience could also come at a cost. What was the experience like? Are you leaving a head coach job now to come here? And if so, why? There are things there we have to answer, and it's not that it's a deal breaker, but I'm going to want to know why. But that's where we just spend all of our time really diving into the candidates right now, so we learn. Okay. I lied. I found a few more questions. There might be two more. Let me see. Oh, hold on, Millie. There's a lot more. All right, there's 20 of you still in the chat. Let me ask you this, because we're coming up on 3 hours. If just real quick, yes or no in the chat, would you be open if I opened this, like if we stopped tonight and then I opened up another session Saturday morning to answer questions? Would that be acceptable? Would you appreciate that? So that we can you all need to go to your families too. If you have families, I know this is valuable for y'all, and I want to be sure and answer your questions. But tell me, could we end tonight and pick up Saturday morning? I see, absolutely. Like, what are you going to say? No. I mean, it's a baited question. And here's what I'll tell you. Because the people that know me know, like, I love this. I want to help people grow. And again, I know only one person is going to get hired for this job. But if you're invested in you, and you're going to be in this mastermind, I hope that you'll stay. First of all, you got a month of access just because you're here tonight. You paid for a month, and that'll go from the time. So if you went in today, you got a full month. I hope that you'll stay long term. And really, because then use me as a resource. You may be applying for a job up in Keller, and you put on their Aim High Mastermind parentheses Jay Zeller, and Eric may see that and be like, oh man, he's a part of that. Well, Eric may give me a call to find out, what do I know about you? And yeah, man, that guy's an active participant, always there, type of stuff. Who knows? So let's do that. All of this will get emailed out tomorrow morning. So I start my morning on Aim High before I ever come to work. So I will get this emailed out so that everybody will get the link to this. Almost, we're at 2 hours and 49 minutes now. And then I will look at another time, Saturday morning, and we'll pick up and go another hour and a half of questions, whatever we need. All right. Hey, I appreciate you all. Eric, I appreciate you hanging in.
No problem.
And I will see those of you that are able to hop on Saturday. If for some reason you're not able to hop on Saturday, that will also be recorded. And if you want to, you can send me an email with a question. And so I'll get your question answered in that live stream, and you'll be able to go back and listen to that recorded message as well. All right, everyone. Thank you all for your time. an investment into yourself. Good night, everybody.